let's talk about what materials you're going to need for this class. We're going to be using acrylic paint to do our illustration. Why? Well, first of all, acrylic is a very commonly used medium in the field. That's number one. Number two, it's very flexible and correctable, meaning that if you make some kind of mistake, no worry, you can just paint over it again. If I give you feedback and tell you to change something, no problem, you can move it, which is not the case for a lot of other illustration mediums, let's say like watercolor or pen and ink or even color pencil. Those things are a little bit more inflexible, and I don't want any of you sweating bullets, oh my god, I'm going to make a mistake with pen and ink. With acrylic, that's not an issue. It's also a very versatile medium. There's a huge range of techniques, different things you can add to it. You can make it look like watercolor, you can make it look like oil, you can make it really thick, thin, transparent, you can throw sand into it and make a sandy painting if you want. A lot of possibility with acrylic paint. So this is going to be an excellent medium through which we're going to learn how to illustrate. So since we're using acrylic, you are going to need to buy tubes of acrylic paint. Mostly the small tubes. These are the 2 fluid ounces tubes. The only color you're going to need a little more of is, I'm out of this one, your white, which I'm going to ask you to buy the larger tube. So this is going to be the 5 fluid ounces. Why do you need more white? Well, because white goes into just about every mixture you make. So whether it's a shadow or brighter color, you're going to have a little bit of white in it, probably. So you're going to find yourself using a lot more of your white than your other colors. Now, a lot of the colors, like this one, you're actually going to use very, very little of it. And it's going to last you a long time, which is good because these brighter colors, your cadmium yellow, cadmium red, are going to be the slightly more expensive ones. Pigments have different prices, let's put it this way. Some pigments are cheap, and hence the tube of paint is relatively cheap. Some pigments are a little more expensive, like this cadmium. Again, the good thing with the more expensive colors is that they tend to be very saturated, very, very strong. And this tube I've had for years and years and years, and I use little tiny amounts. But look, it depends on the kind of illustration you do. So if you, for some reason, want to do a super bright, saturated yellow illustration, you're probably going to go through a lot of cadmium yellow. I tend not to. But look, my illustrations are mostly muted. You know, they're kind of a lot of earth tones. So I tend to go through earth colors faster than I do these prismatic colors, bright colors. Okay, a couple things you need to know about paint. Try, if you can, to buy one of these 2 brands, either the Liquitex or the Golden. These are the 2 industry standard paints on the market. You'll probably find me using a bunch of other ones. Let's see, I don't know, sometimes I use this brand, I have a bunch of it laying around. It's pretty good if you can find it, but these are the 2 most commonly found. This is Liquitex Heavy Body, this is just regular Liquitex. I don't know why this is printed this way and this is printed this way, I can't explain. Exactly the same, right? This is perhaps a little bit thicker. It's technically used for building up brush strokes, but you know, they work almost exactly the same. These 2 brands are interchangeable. I don't know. I haven't tried differentiating, doing some kind of blind test to find the difference between them. They're pretty much the same, as far as I know. The only difference is preference in the tube. This is a plastic tube. This is aluminum. I don't know what it's made of. Some artists really hate these metal tubes. They crumple, and usually it's hard to get paint out at the very last bit. So a lot of artists buy Liquitex simply because they like the plastic tubes. That's the only difference. Try to buy one of these 2 brands, if you can. Right? There are student-grade paints on the market. So, for instance, Liquitex Basics. It's a lot cheaper. They come in these kind of jumbo tubes. Try to avoid student-grade paint, if you can. What's the difference? What's the difference between student-grade paint, like a big jumbo tube of Liquitex Basics, and a high-quality brand? Well, here's a quick illustration. Imagine, if you will, a tube of professional paint. So this is going to be golden. And then imagine, if you will, a big jumbo tube of student grade paint. What's in paint? Well, essentially 3 things. First, you have pigment. So it's ground up mineral, some kind of chemical that gives the paint the color. A professional student. Professional grade of paint is going to have a lot of pigment in it, as much as possible, which is going to make the paint really concentrated. It's going to allow you to use smaller amounts of it. That's really what makes the paint good, high quality, the pigment. Obviously the quality of the pigment, but I don't know, I suspect that most manufacturers get their chemicals, their pigments from the same place, and really the only difference is the concentration. Now, the second thing is binder. So binder is the fluid, the glue that holds the paint together, allows it to dry and to stick on your painting surface. So we've got pigment, then we have binder. In the case of acrylic paint, the binder is plastic. It's some kind of polymer emulsion between plastic and water that dries hard. Don't ask me to explain the chemistry, I don't know it. But then, all paint, even professional quality paint, have something called filler. What is filler? Filler is some kind of clear glass or chalk material that fills out the body of the paint, fills out the consistency of the paint. So the problem is that some pigments, particularly like the earth tones, are really big like this when ground up. They have a large particle size. Some pigments, the brighter colors, the dyes, the more chemical pigments, look like this. They're much finer. Without the filler, this paint is going to be very fluid, so you're going to open up the tube and it's just going to spill out everywhere. This tube is going to be really chunky, it's going to be really pasty, and it's going to be hard to use these two paints together. Okay? So the filler evens out the consistency of the paint. So in this paint there's going to be more filler to make the paint heavier feeling. And then here there's going to be a little bit filler also to thin out the paint a little bit, to make it chunky, so to make it less chunky. So it sort of evens out all the consistency of the paint, so that when you squeeze them all out, they all kind of feel the same, which is important. Not crucial, but important. Okay, so that's the professional quality paint. The student grade paint does this. It has pigment, of course it does. It needs to have color. And probably the same pigment that's in the professional quality paint. That's just my hypothesis. It's going to have binder. And then it's going to have a ton of filler. It's going to have a ton of filler. In this case, not to even out the consistency of the paint, but to dilute the paint, to make you think like you're getting a good deal. Right? To cheapen the paint, to make the product cheaper. Right? Filler costs nothing, right? It's glass, it's chalk, it's stuff that's commonly found everywhere. Filler. So here's the deal. The professional quality paint, even though it's a smaller tube, is going to contain much more pigment than your student grade paint. So don't think you're getting a great deal. You know, really, when it comes to art supplies, for the most part, some products maybe are hyped, but you get what you pay for. And what you're paying for is pigment. What you're paying for is pigment. So you're actually buying a giant tube of paint. What you're buying is binder and filler. Now, what's the difference in terms of working process? Well, pretty easy. The professional quality paint is going to be really highly concentrated. It's going to be really dense. You're going to need a little tiny amount of it to get the color you want. This one is going to end up being kind of transparent. You're going to have to go over it layer and layer and layer to get the opacity you want. It's not going to be quite as bright. It's going to be harder to use. So look, if you can't afford the professional quality paint, I get it, I understand. You can stagger your purchases. This is something we'll talk about later. If you look at the class schedule, we're not going to be working in full color until a couple of weeks into the class. So you can buy your black and white paint first, because we're going to be working black and white, then a few other colors next, little by little. But here's the deal. We're all trained to become professionals. And in order to become a professional illustrator, you need to work with professional materials, professional supplies. It's a little bit like going to a music school and practicing on a plastic violin. Well, look, if ultimately you're going to be playing on a Stradivarius 1800 violin from the Baroque era, you need to practice on a really good violin, right? So you want to be a professional, you need to use professional quality materials. Unfortunately, I understand materials are expensive, but make an investment in this class and please buy good supplies. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that quite often you're going to see a color and then it's going to say hue after it. So for instance, cadmium yellow light, hue. What does hue mean? Hue means that the company is replacing the more expensive pigment with a cheaper pigment. So quite often you'll see cadmium yellow, it's going to be more expensive, and then next to it, or close to it somewhere, you're going to see cadmium yellow hue. That's not going to contain any cadmium yellow in it. It's going to contain a cheaper yellow pigment that doesn't work quite as well, but approximates the original color. Now, in the case of cadmium yellow light, the reason why they replace it is actually twofold. Cadmium is very expensive. It's one of the more expensive pigments. That's number one. And number two, cadmium is toxic. So another reason why you might choose cadmium yellow hue as opposed to the actual real cadmium is because you want to avoid the toxicity. Now, we'll talk about the toxicity of paint in a second. I don't want to scare anybody away. It's really not a big issue. Basically, avoid any color that has hue after its name because, again, the manufacturer is just trying to trick you, but basically it's replaced that pigment, a more expensive pigment, for a cheaper pigment that kind of looks like it. Don't buy it. The only exception is alizarin crimson hue, which for some reason now only comes in hue. The original alizarin crimson is really rare. You can't buy it, particularly in Liquitex brand. Why? Because it's not light fast. Light fast meaning that it reacts with light and fades. The original pigment does. So as a result, a lot of art companies have replaced alizarin crimson with a more permanent pigment, which is actually better than the original alizarin crimson. So this is the only exception. You're not going to be able to find the actual alizarin crimson. The hue is going to be perfectly fine. That is the only exception. Okay, let's go over the brushes. Let's talk about the many different kinds of brushes available on the market. Brushes fall into two main categories. We've got natural hair brushes, and we've got our synthetics. Natural hair brushes are really, really common. There's lots of different kinds of materials being used. So quite often you'll see squirrel, you'll see mongoose, sometimes you'll see sable. Sable is really nice, really expensive. So it goes on and on and on. For oil painting, we've got hog bristle, camel hair sometimes. Here's a problem with natural hair brushes. Acrylic destroys them. Acrylic destroys them because a natural hair brush, if you look at it under a microscope, isn't. If you look at a hair under a microscope, right, that hair is going to look like this. It's got little ridges in it. Acrylic over time builds up in those ridges and destroys your brush. Plus, there's a number of different techniques in acrylic where you're kind of scrubbing and using the brush fairly roughly. That also damages the brush. So really, natural brushes should be used only for watercolor, really mostly only for watercolor. Sometimes ink if you're careful with it. If it's, sometimes you can use waterproof ink too, but you have to wash it out very, very quickly. Natural brushes, if they're good, are usually more expensive. For instance, like a really nice sable brush. I'm going to boast a little bit and show you my really nice sable brush here. This is a Spanish brand, Kolinsky Red Sable, super expensive. Acrylic will never touch this brush. It's going to destroy it. Okay, which means that we're going to be using synthetics. Now, synthetics are really limited in material. They're all nylon for the most part, I think, if I'm not mistaken. This is synthetic brush. Sometimes the manufacturer will dye the synthetic brush, so this is brown, to make it look like a natural hair brush. It's only for appearance. In terms of the material, it's exactly the same. So please buy fine-haired synthetic brushes, not bristles, right? We're going to be creating smooth textures. We're going to be doing lots of different techniques. But basically, you want to get fine-haired synthetic brushes. This is the brand I recommend. It's going to be listed on your syllabus. The Winsor & Newton, you guys see this? Winsor & Newton University line, right? Get the synthetic. Leave your natural hair brushes for oil paint, for watercolor, all that kind of stuff, okay? Get the synthetic white nylon. That's number one. Number two, in terms of shape, there's also two broad categories, rounds and flats. A round brush is, well, a round brush. It's a brush with a round ferrule like this. What are they used for? Well, look, some artists use it for a lot of their work. I tend to use it for detail. So I want you all to buy a few little small round brushes. In the university series, that's going to be the number 2 or a number 4. Little tiny brushes for eyelashes, for stipples, for pimples, that kind of stuff, for lines, for details. You want to buy at least 2 or 3 of them, ideally 4, because these brushes need to be super sharp all the time, and over time, if you abuse them, and you will, they're going to have a tendency to fan out and become somewhat useless. So buy yourself at least, I recommend, at least 4 1/8 of an inch brushes. Again, in the university series, this Winsor University series, that's going to be a number 2. So your rounds are your detail brushes, and then we have what are called flats. Now, flats come in 2 different lengths. Let me see if I can quickly find a longer one. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is a flat proper. Flats, by the way, are flat. They have flat ferrules as opposed to round ferrules. They usually have a straight ending to them. What you want are not flats, but specifically brights. So what's the difference? A flat is going to have long hairs. So this is about 1 inch wide. A bright is going to have shorter hairs. Why are brights, for our purpose, better than flats? Well, acrylic is viscous. Acrylic is viscous. I'm looking for the cap for this pen. Here it is. Acrylic is viscous, and it helps to have slightly shorter hairs to push and scrub the paint around. If you have a bright, the brush is going to be so floppy, it's going to be a little bit harder to use. The advantage of the longer hairs is that they hold a lot of water media, so they're better for kind of diluted washes. The shorter hairs are for viscous paint. So get some brights. These are your workhorse brushes, so you're going to need to buy at least 2 1/4 inch brushes, 1/4 inch wide. Let's see, that's going to be a number 3, like this. You want to get a few brushes that are 1/2 inch. So these are approximately 1/2 inch, like this. We're going to use that covering large areas. And then you want to buy a brush that's about 2 inches wide for applying what's called gesso. So gesso is the ground surface, the painting surface on which we're going to paint. We'll talk about gesso in a second. You want to buy a gesso brush with fine hairs, similar to the ones found in your regular brushes. Why is that important? Because sometimes when you go to the art supply store and you ask for a gesso brush, they'll give you this horrible house painting brush. The problem with it is the brush is filled with hog bristle, which is really coarse. So when you're creating a smooth painting surface to start on, you're not going to get something smooth, you're going to get something with a lot of streaks in it. And then a cheap brush like this is going to constantly have hairs falling out of it. So you're going to get little annoying hairs all the way through your painting surface. Not good. So get a brush like this. At Blix, this brush is probably a little more than maybe $10 to $15. Get a brush like this. The good thing about the flats is that they do not have to be new. In fact, sometimes when they're old, they're actually a little bit better. These are brushes that do not need to keep a point. They'll last you forever, as long as you clean them out really well and don't let the paint little by little gunk them up. So this brush, well, I should have cleaned it better, but it's got, I don't know if you can see it, it's got a little bit of acrylic stuck here near the ferrule. And over time, it's going to build up little by little by little, and it's going to turn into a stick. So as long as you wash these brushes, the flats will last you a long time. The rounds are going to start fraying, which is why you need to constantly replace them. Normally, every time I go to the art supply store, every couple of weeks, I'm probably going to have to buy, I probably buy myself another new round, just because I need one sharp little brush for detail work. Okay, last thing I want to say about brushes. Try to buy good quality brushes. These are actually student grade, but they are universally used by many professional artists. Particularly for acrylic, you don't need super expensive brushes, these natural hair brushes. The cheaper brushes, because, you know, look, you're going to be using them fairly roughly. Acrylic is sort of an abusive medium to brushes. You don't need to buy the super expensive brushes. Buy these high-end or higher-end student grade brushes. Do not buy a baggie of craft brushes. So the problem is you're going to go to the art supply store, you're going to see the brush section, and then in the corner of your eye, you're going to see the kiddie section, where the crayons are and the tubs of edible paint, whatever the kids use. And there's going to be like these baggies of craft brushes. And they're going to look very similar to these. Like the hairs are going to be white nylon. The problem is you're going to take them home and you're going to find that they're going to immediately go from straight to this, to frayed. The hairs are going to fall out. Those brushes are really worthless. So don't buy a little baggie of 20 brushes for $5. Invest in your brushes. As long as you wash them, you take care of them, they're going to last you this semester and next semester and next semester, and then you're going to be using them in your professional work. One of the great things about acrylic is that you can paint on just about anything provided that it's porous. That means that we can use any kind of paper. We can paint on raw wood, basically anything we want. So for this class, I recommend that you buy some cheap cardboard. Now, don't buy corrugated cardboard, the kind that's used in boxes. So this is just regular cardboard. This is 2-ply. It says $9 on it, $9.50. That was the price for a large sheet. I don't even remember how large it was, maybe 30 by 40. It's perfectly fine. We're going to cover this with gesso anyway. So the fact this material is cheap is completely irrelevant. You can also work on any kind of sturdy Bristol cardboard, so like heavy watercolor paper, which can be expensive. Look, don't waste your money on grounds. So for instance, in illustration, it's really common to work on this crescent board. No need to do it. Here's the thing, this crescent board is cardboard and then it's covered with a really nice sheet of multimedia paper, in this case hot press. We're going to be covering our paper with gesso. That's this stuff which we'll talk about in a second. So it's going to make absolutely no difference how good the paper is. So once again, just buy some cheap cardboard like this, cut it down to the necessary size, and it will be perfectly fine. And if you're working with cardstock, that's fine too, so long as it doesn't start to buckle when you gesso it. So if the paper is too thin and you apply gesso to it, it's going to start getting wavy, then you know that that paper is not good. Which is why I recommend the double ply as opposed to the single ply, because I can go really heavy with the gesso and I know that it's going to retain its straightness. Okay, so besides cardboard, buy a few large sheets of it, cut it down. I can't really estimate how much cardboard you're going to need. We've got some exercises you're going to be doing. We've got some final projects. Maybe I'll do that calculation and let you know later. We're going to be covering this with this. This is acrylic gesso. Gesso is used to prepare your painting surface to make the paint stick to it better. So just a quick demonstration. Where is my sheet of paper? Okay, I guess I can do that here. So the whole point of gesso, actually though there's 2 points to gesso. Let's get the focus back, come back, okay. Here is your unprimed paper. I can work on unprimed paper, but here's what happens. I put down paint, So imagine a side view under a microscope, and here's a bunch of paint. Here's the pigment, dispersed, dispensed in binder, right? On really porous surfaces, the water in the paint gets immediately sucked in, which makes the paint really viscous. It makes it dry really quickly. It makes it hard to move around, which is going to be important. So gesso is going to seal off the surface. It provides a little barrier. Here's the paint, and it's going to keep the water from getting sucked out of the paint, and is going to keep the paint a little bit wetter, a little bit longer. By how much longer? Look, a few extra seconds, 2 or 3 extra seconds, maybe 10 extra seconds, but that is absolutely crucial time for blending, for making adjustments, for if you made a mistake, you can easily lift it off. So we need a little bit of extra time, and the gesso gives it to us. So you'll find that a properly prepared surface is going to be much easier to work on than any kind of raw porous material like wood or paper. So that's why we're buying the gesso. Now, gesso comes in professional grade. Here's Liquitex Professional. This is the brand I recommend. By the way, buy a larger bottle of this. This 8 fluid ounces is going to be too small for this class. So get 16. That should be enough for just about everything. Do not buy the student grade gesso. It's really super coarse. They put a bunch of sand in it or some kind of pumice, which turns your painting surface into sandpaper. There's also something called clear gesso. Also stay away from that. So gesso is essentially acrylic paint. It's got binder, it's got white pigment in it, and it also has a little bit of chalk. Some kind of marble dust, just to make the surface not entirely non-absorbent. So it gives it a little bit of absorbency, it gives it a little bit more grip, it allows the paint to grip to the gesso better. The clear gesso has no pigment in it. And also the grain, the marble dust is really, really coarse. So don't buy clear, don't buy student grade, buy either Liquitex or Golden professional grade gesso. Again, 16-ounce bottle will be perfectly fine. Okay, let's talk palettes. A palette like this is perfectly fine and actually has the advantage that there's absolutely no cleanup. The problem is acrylic dries really quickly, especially in the high climate of California. So you put down the paint, you start using it, and then usually it dries up before you're done using the entire paint, which forces you to constantly be squeezing more, which forces you to run through your paint really quickly. Plus, let's say I have some kind of mixture or combination of mixtures here that I'm using to paint a sky or a tree. I'm going to be constantly forced to remix them because they're going to be drying on my palette. So while this is convenient and it tears out, and you can use them, you can use a plastic plate, doesn't really matter. However, this little contraption is much, much better. This is called a Stay Wet palette. They come in 2 different sizes as far as I can tell. Smaller size like this, which is actually good for most of the work that we're going to be doing. And a larger size, kind of like a studio model. Okay, I'm going to open it up. It's going to be a little bit gross because I've used this for quite a number of years. I've used the back of the lid for larger mixtures. Alright, so what is a Stay Wet palette? A Stay Wet palette is a plastic tray. It has this kind of specially absorbent paper. Okay, it's time to change it out. And then it comes with a yellow sponge that sits inside here that has disintegrated a long time ago and has been, in my case, replaced with a blue shop towel. So the point is that you wet the sponge. You want to make sure it's saturated but not completely soaking wet. And then you take this special palette paper, and by the way, this Stay Wet palette come with extra sheets. You need to activate this paper, so listen carefully. This paper needs to be activated. You need to soak this in really, really hot water for about 10 to 15 minutes until it goes from kind of opaque to translucent. You're going to actually kind of see the paper kind of activate. Then you take this palette paper, you put it on your wet paper towel, and then when you squeeze out paint, it stays wet magically. So this paper is, I don't know what it's made of. It's magic. So water is able to permeate it, but paint is not able to go in. So it kind of glides and stays on top of the surface. And it keeps your mixtures wet. So when I squeeze out paint here, it's going to stay wet until I'm completely done with it. When I pre-mix a bunch of different values, they're going to stay wet. And really, look, I haven't used this all summer, and the paint here is still wet. Now, you have to be a little bit careful about cleaning out your palette once in a while, because these are kind of wet, humid conditions, and you can have all kinds of mold develop. So I've had it happen that I have a stay wet palette in the trunk of my car, I open it up, and there's some kind of life forming at the corners. So and also it kind of stinks. So make sure you clean out the palette once in a while. I should take my own advice. This stay wet palette is really revolutionary. I don't know when it was invented, but until I found the stay wet palette, until this discovery, until I discovered it, I really hated working in acrylic because of its really fast drying properties, because of the waste, the amount of paint just wasted sitting on your palette. The ability to have little mixtures wet on your palette makes things just so much easier. So please, please, please get a stay wet palette. They're inexpensive. They're, I don't know, maybe $20 at the most. This one I've had, I mean, you can see how long I've had it. I mean, it's been maybe 20 years, maybe longer. I have no idea really how long this palette is. The sponge, you can buy new ones, by the way, but look, just fold a paper towel at the bottom once the sponge is destroyed, and you'll have many, many years of use working with this material. If you don't want to get one, fine, suffer, because really, these palettes are perfectly fine. Again, they're convenient, usable, you can get rid of them. But I don't know, look, environmentally it's problematic, right? This constant disposable everything. So get yourself a stay wet palette. It'll make your painting existence much more tolerable. Okay, now let's go through the rest of the materials that we're going to be using in the class. You want to get yourself some really nice sturdy paper towels. These are blue shop towels that you can get at a hardware store. If you can't get to a hardware store, go to the supermarket and buy Viva brand, V-I-V-A paper towels, or Brawny. They're going to be equally good. The reason why it's good to have really sturdy paper towels is that they're really highly absorbent and allow you to control how much water is on the brush, which you will find is really the key to controlling the paint. Plus, sometimes you're going to make a boo-boo, you're going to make a mistake, and you're going to want to correct your painting quickly before it dries. This paper towel, you're going to be able to lift off the paint, and it's not going to leave a bunch of little microfibers on the painting surface. So have a sturdy paper towel, good for cleaning brushes. Sturdy shop towels are best. You're going to need some masking tape. So we're going to be using this kind of flippy, floppy painting surface. Always helps to tape your painting surface to a drawing board, which is some kind of sturdier, you know, like just a piece of masonite or something. We'll talk about drawing boards in a second. You're going to need masking tape to do it. So I'll show you guys how to prepare a painting surface. We're going to be using masking tape. Get the masking tape that's blue, that's made by 3M. Don't buy the cheaper stuff. The problem with the cheaper masking tape is that quite often it'll either tear your surface or leave a bunch of gluey gunk on there. So more on masking tape later, but for now just get the Scotch Blue 3M 1-inch masking tape. You need a bowl for water, right? So acrylic dilutes in water. You need a bowl that holds at least 2 cups of water, so you're not constantly changing the water out, running to the sink. This is Trader Joe's olives. So buy some olives, eat them, and then you get this little handy container. All right, Exacto knife. So you're going to be using it to cut down your painting surfaces. Mat cutter doesn't work. Definitely don't use scissors. I might do a little demonstration on how to cut painting surfaces down. There's a little bit of trickery to it. But get yourself an Exacto knife and a bunch of extra number 11 blades. Really useful tool. Look, sometimes you can even use it to make corrections, though that's a little bit of a dangerous method. Okay, now this is what we're going to be doing our underdrawing with. So in more complex illustrations, obviously you're not going to want to just start painting. Obviously, you're going to want to draw in your design first, your sketch first, and then we're going to paint on top of it. You want to be drawing in a medium that is water resistant, because if I do my drawing in, let's say, a charcoal pencil, as soon as water hits the charcoal stroke, it's going to dilute the mark, it's going to disappear, and then most importantly, this charcoal is going to mix into your paint and give you dirty colors. So you want to work with a wax-based pencil. Prismacolor is my preferred choice, but look, any color pencil, except for Prismacolor Color Erase. Those are made by Prismacolor. They're a lot thinner and they have erasers in the back. Don't buy those because they are water soluble. So as soon as water hits them, the stroke gets diluted. That's number one. So you want to make sure you're drawing with a wax-based pencil. And then always, always, always some kind of neutral color. So I quite often use brown or a gray because in thin applications, if the color of the pencil is too strong, with thin applications of paint, you might still be able to see the color of the pencil underneath. So if I'm using a bright blue, I have to paint really thickly to cover it up. And quite often, as the paint dries, it'll have a tendency to become a little more transparent, and you're going to start seeing the pencil marks, which is kind of irritating. So always a neutral color. It could be a brown or some kind of gray. I usually use gray because it's neutral in color and doesn't affect the colors that I put on top. Have a lighter gray, like a white almost, and a darker gray. That is really important because, let's see where I have these boards. Sometimes you're going to choose to work on a dark gray surface like this. Sometimes you're going to want to choose to work on a light gray surface like this. So we'll talk about that later, but essentially the color of your ground is going to affect the overall appearance of your piece. So if I want to do something dark and dramatic, I'll start off with a darker ground. If I want to do something kind of pale and hazy and romantic, I might start off with a lighter ground. If I do my underdrawing with a dark gray pencil on a darker ground, I'm going to barely be able to see it. So on a darker ground, a lighter pencil is more effective, more visible, right? And conversely, right, a lighter pencil on a lighter ground doesn't show up. In this case, I'm going to use a darker gray because it's more visible. I'll probably use an even darker gray for this. Okay, so have two kinds of gray pencils, light gray, dark gray, for both eventualities, possibilities. All right. Okay, drawing board. Okay, get yourself a drawing board. This is not a drawing board. This is just a cut piece of masonite. All of our assignments are going to be either 11 by 14 or larger. Excuse me, did I say larger? Smaller. 11 by 14 or smaller. So you want a board that will comfortably fit that 11 by 14 format. I think this is 11 by 14. This might be a little bit smaller. You can use your regular drawing board, 18 by 24, but it's a little bit unwieldy. So get a board that is a little bit larger than 11 by 14. We're going to be taping our illustration papers, our painting surfaces on the board. That's going to make the surface a little more sturdy. We're going to be able to prop it up, which is quite often really useful in painting, having a little bit of an angle when you're working. Get yourself a drawing board. Okay, what else? Okay, this is about the last thing, and this is really important. I have a little separate video to give you on sketchbooks, but we can talk about sketchbooks right now. Everybody, get yourself a sketchbook. It should be at least 9 by 12 or larger. For this class, sketchbooks are really important for doing all the preparatory work for your illustration. So we're going to be doing concept studies. We're going to develop our ideas. We're going to be doing compositional studies to develop the compositions. We're going to be doing value studies to figure out how your compositions are lit. We're going to be doing final sketches to determine what details are going to be included in your illustration. All this is going to happen in your sketchbook. So if you already have a sketchbook, fine, just make sure it's not smaller than 9 by 12. And this is where all of your preparatory stuff goes. So this is a series of compositional studies that I did for The Raven, you know, Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, The Raven, Poe, I think, yeah. This is where I do my preparatory work for my graphic novels. So here I'm working out different compositions. Again, more on sketchbooks later, because your sketchbooks quite often are not just work tools, they're also tools for doodling when you're talking on the phone. But again, more on that later. Have a sketchbook. I prefer the wire-bound sketchbooks because you can tear pages out, which is quite often useful when transferring your work. Let's say you want to Xerox it, shrink it up and down. Having a wire-bound sketchbook is just more versatile. Okay, and some drawing materials. When you're doing your initial stuff, your concept studies, your compositional studies, the medium doesn't matter. You can use a pink ballpoint pen because it's not really about the medium at that point. However, once you start doing value studies, once you start doing sketches like a final sketches where you're working out the values. You want to use a medium that approximates paint as closely as possible without actually being paint. So for that, you need to get yourself some charcoal pencils. Any brand will be perfectly fine. Get some charcoal pencils. You need to get one of these things. This is called a Chamois Cloth. It'll be listed in the syllabus. It doesn't look like this out of the store. Usually it's kind of like this pale, kind of beigey color, kind of like the color of this this handle here. Get yourself a chamois cloth. Then you're going to need some hard erasers, a kneaded eraser. This is stuff that you probably have laying around from your drawing classes. Kneaded eraser, some eraser holders might be useful. And then, this is really important, you also need to get yourself a stick of extra soft compressed charcoal. So I'll be showing you a technique called charcoal reduction, which you probably have seen already, which is really useful for doing final sketches, really useful for doing value studies. It's a technique that kind of, again, approximates the contrast you can get through painting, that's really flexible, erasable, that you can move things around, and is my preferred method for doing sketches when I'm doing illustrations. Okay, so I believe that covers all the supplies you need, and right now I'm looking at one additional supply that I forgot to tell you about. This is a hairdryer, as you know. Guys, right now it's really hot. I'm taping this, I don't know, what day is it? August 14th. As long as it stays hot, your acrylic is going to dry really quickly, probably too quickly for your comfort. However, as the days get colder, as the weather gets a little more damp, some of you guys are going to be working on assignments at 4 in the morning. Of course you are. And your paint's not drying fast enough. Your hairdryer is going to save you. The hairdryer saves you tremendous amount of time. So, you know, I have a hairdryer next to me, and while I'm doing my hair, I'm also painting, and I dry off my paints. It just saves you time. So have a hairdryer handy. It's also really useful for preparing painting services. Okay, now I'm done with the supplies. Everybody, I know this is expensive. I haven't calculated the costs lately because, I don't know, I have tons and tons of supplies left over laying around. I can't remember the last time I bought new supplies. I don't know how much it costs. I know it's expensive, particularly the paint. You can stagger your purchases. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be working primarily in black and white. So just buy a tube of white, a tube of black, you know, buy a few brushes, only buy 1/8 of an inch brush. Look, if things really become a problem and you can't afford the professional quality paint, okay, buy the student grade paint. If you can't afford the professional quality gesso, fine. Use the crappy student grade gesso. You're going to suffer a little bit, but look, I know plenty of artists that use student grade materials, and even worse. Yes, there's worse than student grade paint. There's craft paint. Look, it's more about how the materials are used, about your drawing, compositional, color skills, than it is about the paint you use. Plenty of artists use super expensive paint and get absolutely crappy work. And conversely, I know lots of professional artists that, because they're just used to it, they're used to being poor, they use really crappy materials and do absolutely beautiful work.